Welcome to the Unshadowed Thought Podcast with James Hall. This podcast is dedicated to Michelle Goyevich, Ed White, Caitlin Treacle, and the countless others that have lost their lives as a direct result of psychiatric harms. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Unshadowed Thought Podcast. I've been away for quite a while. I had some issues pop up, as we all tend to do when we're in recovery, or we're injured, whatever you want to call it. But I wanted to share what happened to me, how it kind of came about, and then what happened as a result. It's all really, really impactful and important stuff to me, and it had a really big impact on me for a long time, meaning my life was really, really hard for a long time. Months, I think. It started around January, I think, and just now I'm coming to a place where I can kind of reach back out and record a podcast, talk to some people and stuff like that, because before it was just really, really hard. The good news is I learned some lessons, I met some people, and I continue to improve, which when you're in the midst of a really big hardship, you think it's all over. You think you're not going to improve anymore. You think you're going backwards. I really, really understand that for the people that are going through it right now. I've experienced that so many times, and it's just as hard every time you go through it. As a result, though, hopefully I can give you guys some resources to try, some things to think about, and maybe together we'll all improve from each other's mistakes, from sharing what works and sharing experiences. You know, that's really the whole purpose of this podcast, is to share information that I've learned with you in an easy way. And as a result, I always hear back from people, and then that's further stuff that I can share. And things just move forward in a much more clear and helpful direction than us being scattered and not sharing information, keeping stuff to ourselves, as lots of time we do through no fault of our own, and being silenced or told that what we have to say isn't important. But the fact is, every single person's story is critically important. There's all kinds of details that other people can learn from and grow from, and when we share our experiences, we compare our experiences, it's even more detail, more data we can gather, more information we can gather to learn and go forward in a positive direction. One thing that really gets me about a lot of medical science now is that there's just not very many patient narratives. You know, even if you look at trial data, it's just data, and it's just not very helpful. It's a really small range of data. There's not very many collection points, and we're usually a small group of people in the trial as well. And when you look at it in that way, lots of times the trials are almost useless. Like if you're trying to make a decision about whether or not to try a treatment, a drug, or a medical device, looking at these trials, people make a big deal about, clinicians will tell you all kinds of stuff about how great it is and how impactful it is. But the fact is that most trials aren't very impactful. They're not very helpful. They're not very relevant. And the thing they're absolutely the worst at is conveying good patient information. When's the last time you heard of a patient experience in a trial? You don't, right? And people drop out of the trial. You don't know why. People stay in the trial. They report good results. You don't really know what that means, right? People report negative results. You don't really know what that means either. And it's all subject to the researchers, the doctors that are putting the trial together, right? You're trusting them to record and take information accurately when that may not be the case at all. Probably over the course of this podcast, I'll keep jumping back to relevant pieces of information like this and compare and contrast what we see in the medical community and then what we see in the survivor community, the harm survivor community, the psychiatric harm community, and what the difference is between what we learn there and what we learn through kind of this recorded science narrative, because they're drastically different, and each one has its strong points and its weak points. But the most important thing is, are we getting relevant data? Are we getting relevant information from either one? And I think together, by sharing our perspectives and our thoughts, it's really easy for us to figure out which one's helpful and which one's not, which ones we should use and which ones we shouldn't. So kind of with that baseline, I'll jump into what happened to me and why I think it happened to me, and then what's happened since then and has allowed me to overcome what happened. I'm not in a great place, but I'm in a place that's nowhere near as bad as it was, and now I really put a lot of my energy into keeping it that way. If I can move in a positive direction, great, but keeping myself from going back to that place is maybe one of the most important things I do with the rest of my life for myself. All right, with that being said, let me paint a picture for you of where I was at in January of this year. It's 2022 right now. I had been through the holiday. I kind of been eating badly for me, right? I was on a eat a diet, so it's really close to like a paleo. You don't take in anything that's going to put excess amounts of sugar in your system. No contaminants, no artificial anything, really no dairy, no gluten, no sugar, that kind of stuff. I think I've explained that a little bit on a previous podcast, so I won't go into it too much. But I had gone through this initial 3-month cleanse where you do it really intensely and then you kind of reintroduce some things in really small amounts. Well, that had come off the rails a little bit for me, and through the holidays, I had eaten just all kinds of stuff that I wasn't supposed to eat at all. So the frequency was way too much, right? I was kind of eating the way I used to, which means eating anything's game, like pizza, burgers one night, and then the next day I try to clean up and eat healthy, eat salads and organic chicken, salmon, whatever. Next day, maybe for a few days, to try to kind of rectify the mistakes I had made with my diet or the indulgences I had, and go back and forth, flip-flop. I mean, sometimes I ate good, a lot of times I ate bad, but the repercussions really weren't that bad at the time. I think when you process that sugar through your system, different things that make you feel good, it can really mask how bad you feel. But what had happened over the series of 3 or 4 months, it probably started in September and went through December of last year. But as time went on, I realized my cognition was getting poorer. It was reverting. I had this one episode where my vision just got fuzzy. I had blind spots. I had like a migraine without the pain. My cognition got really poor. I had this aura, these really weird feelings and sensations. I had these blind spots in my vision and all this stuff that just happened. I think that was maybe in December, if I remember right. I could be wrong. But there was a few events that I had been really bad, and I knew that I had come just way too far off the beaten path of eating well way too frequently, and that I was progressively feeling worse. And when I would eat badly and kind of get sugar and different stuff in my system, it would make me feel good for a shorter and shorter period, which some people are lucky if they eat that stuff, they feel really badly. And it's kind of topsy-turvy, but that can actually be a good thing. It keeps you from eating the stuff you shouldn't. Because in my case, I eat stuff that I really, really like, sugar, freaking brownies, pizza, ice cream, whatever, that stuff. And I'll actually feel good for a while, for like a day or two, and then I'll crash and I'll have these ill effects. But if I eat more of it, then it'll kind of negate it and it'll create this merry-go-round. Well, the problem I didn't understand at the time was that when I tried to get, to me, it's the equivalent of drugs, right? Like, some people, addiction is not funny. It's serious. But I'll crave junk food in a way it just mimics addiction. Like, my brain absolutely goes crazy for it. Like, sugar is supposed to be highly addictive, and I think it really is, especially for people that are being completely deprived of it like I was. And so I would kind of have this addict behavior where I would binge really, really hard and feel really, really good, and I would get sick, go back and forth, and I just couldn't get off the merry-go-round. But so the behavior I identified in myself was, as abusive behavior, because I wasn't doing what I knew was good for me, and I would make the choice not to do it based on, a drive rather than, a conscious thought out choice. So that's one way I'm trying to grow. A big hurdle I have is controlling or coming to terms with or finding peace with habits that I have that aren't helpful for me now. And a normal person can go eat ice cream and pizza and burgers or whatever they want. They're not going to have any serious repercussions. But for me, it's different. And different doesn't mean bad. My whole life, I wish I was eating really, really healthy. But the fact that I could eat poorly is the reason I did. But I should have been eating a lot better. And that took a toll on my health for a time. I was like super overweight and had some issues, acid reflux, and different things that actually hurt my health. And then I got my health back under control, but it was just strictly from overeating, binge eating, just rich foods over and over and over again. And in my mind, that's just as dangerous as a lot of other habits that we see as overtly destructive, like smoking or drinking too much or whatever. But I really don't like the labels that society and a lot of people put on things for that reason. You think smoking is destructive because you do too much of it and everybody knows it's bad for you, and for these different reasons, right? But it's the behavior, it's the addictive behavior, the non-rational behavior, the self-indulgent behavior that runs unchecked and uncontemplated, unthought about, unconsidered, that's dangerous, right? Whether that applies to food, sugar, caffeine, opioids, psychiatric drugs, benzodiazepines, anything, eating Tide Pods, not that people are addicted to that, but poor decisions, right? You're making irrational decisions and letting those be the driving force for your health instead of making decisions that are wise and work for the betterment of you and the people around you, right? Identifying that behavior for me, just because it's food my whole life, I've thought of it as harmless, but it's never been. So now I'm working really, really hard to rectify the way I handle those things, the way I think about those things, and how I do those things. And I think that plays a really big part of recovery. And I think for a lot of us, when we look deeper, maybe that's the reason we're in recovery. My recovery, it might be, withdrawing from a psychiatric drug or a non-psychiatric drug. It might be trying to heal from an injury from a medical device. It might be healing from abuse or trauma. These are all forms of recovery. As a human, we're recovering from something that happened to us. Recovery can be synonymous with, drug abuse, stuff like that. I think those are some of the preconceived notions we have to let go of. And not only for ourselves, but for others. A lot of us in the community get really pissed when other members of the community or friends or family use terms that are loaded with us, and they may be doing it to elicit a response from us or to be cruel, or they might not be. And it's important that we try to discern, people's intent and their level of caring when we address them, and not just get pissed because they're using these loaded terms. I really hate when the community comes against each other for that kind of thing, because it's not particularly helpful. I don't know that I've ever come to some success in a relationship or otherwise by nitpicking details and trying to correct small stuff that it doesn't have a lot of point or purpose. So, sidebar, but it's an important one. As I do this podcast, I want to consider more and more the psychological factors that are involved in our recovery, because ultimately one case I'm going to try to make to you, and that I'm testing and trying to see for myself how important it is how our minds and our bodies are really unified together. They're married, they're one thing. We really segregate psychology and physiology, but I'd make an argument that you can't separate the two. And a lot of the things that I learned from what I just went through really back that fact up, that what you experience psychologically, the habits you have, how you operate, has a direct impact on your physiological health, your physical health. And if we don't address them all together, or we don't try to get to the root cause of what's going on, we're not going to be able to improve in a linear fashion or a helpful fashion, or maybe in any fashion at all. A lot of us know that recovery from injury, especially psychiatric injury, and a lot of more complicated injuries, is asymmetrical, right? I want to know why that is. I want to understand what is linear about it and what's not. How can we best recover in a way that looks progressive, that is not disheartening because you go up and then you drop down below the level you're at before. This is the kind of stuff that really wipes people out. And the story is going to go into one of those scenarios and why that can happen. And I'm going to try to identify to the best of my ability, what the factors were. But there's a lot of things at play. And oversimplification has been a big problem, I think, in our community and in our greater community, and just a human problem. Psychiatry oversimplifies people. They're like, there's just a biological cause in the brain for mental disorders, and if we just get to that biological cause, then we can fix it. That's the biggest joke I've ever heard in my life, and that's a joke that I believed before. People are very complex, and to think we can change subjective psychological activity with pills, medications, TMS, ECT, it's just ludicrous. But people believe it. Why do they believe it? Because oversimplification is just an easy answer for things. But if we're going to heal and we're going to improve our communities and ourselves, we're going to have to get past the myth, of oversimplification. All right, with that being said, I'll go into what happened to me over the last number of months, long months, 9 months now. And I'll give a bit of a trigger warning. I'm going to talk about akathisia. I'm going to talk about some extremely unpleasant stuff. In my mind, it's as unpleasant as it gets. I can use graphic language to describe any of it, but anyone that's experienced akathisia or is sensitive to those kind of topics, be careful. Just thinking about akathisia and talking about it now tends to push me back into a place where I start to feel it and experience it, because once you've experienced it, it really has a hold on you. It's really something that you don't want to experience again. And I'm going to be really clear about what I experienced as well, because there's some different forms of it. There's different manifestations for people. I'm not even going to say that I'm absolutely certain that what I experienced was akathisia, because it's really the best classification that I can give it, and I'll explain why. But I'm sure there's some people that disagree with me, and they may have really meritorious thoughts on that. But here we go. So I think back in January, I realized I had been eating badly, and I was going to change the way I ate with a cleanup. So I was going to start the Candida cure or a Candida diet back over from scratch. And that means there's this 90-day cleanse, right? Where everything you eat is clean. No sugars, no nothing that could affect anybody at all in any bad way. No gluten, no cheese, no nothing. So I'm eating like vegetables and clean chicken, salmon, a little bit of beef. I even limit the red meat that I eat, but it has to be like free range, organic, that kind of stuff. But that's it. I mean, and I taken a few supplements that are like kind of herb combinations that help support your liver through the process, and also try to kind of evacuate the toxins that get emitted by your stomach as candida, theoretically, right? As the candida dies off, the bad bacteria dies off in your stomach, draws these toxins out. Also something I knew there was this question of toxicity during the process, but when I started experiencing really horrible symptoms during this, I didn't understand exactly how bad it could be, or I didn't really care if there was toxicity involved. But based on what I experienced, I'm very certain that toxicity is involved. So that impacts your liver, that impacts a lot of things, and it's a consideration for people to make. So I was in January, I started this cleanse, or I should say I just started eating really, really clean. I'm drinking a lot of water, try to flush the bad stuff out, taking a few supplements, support the process as well. At that time, I kind of splurged financially, had a really fun time, spent some money around the holiday season, but in January, I think it's important to note as well that like I tightened my spending. I didn't have anything left to spend. Not that I have a lot of money for stuff in the first place, but basically I told myself like, hey, you'll have fun around the holidays, don't care about finances so much, and then in January you'll have to be strict, but that's fine, right? So there's this other piece of the psychology where I tightened down financially, didn't have anything to look forward to there. So essentially someone that's injured and has a lot of limitations on what they can do and experience, there's not a like, right, you can eat food that you like, that's enjoyable, right? You can spend money on some cool stuff that you can enjoy that's limited compared to other people, and that's something you enjoy, right? But like sitting around doing nothing when you're in pain all day is not enjoyable, right? There's a lot of things you can't enjoy because they're painful. And so the psychological dynamic is different than it used to be for me, and maybe different to an ordinary person. Like you can't just get enjoyment out of anything, right? Because there's these limiting factors that are usually pain or like cognition, right? Like I can't just sit down and do a crossword puzzle. It'll piss me off more than it would someone else, because the mental energy I have to exert to try to do it is debilitating, if you can believe that. But you can see the state I was in. Psychologically, I was in a state of lack. And the other part that probably played a piece was that I wasn't prepared for what I was about to go through. That's never a good thing either. But when do we ever know when we're about to walk into hell? Like, you just don't. Usually when that happens, you just don't know. If you know, you're not doing it, or you're going to do something to try to mitigate it. For me, I had no idea. So I start cleaning up my diet. I think it was about 2 weeks in, and everything had been normal. And I actually I had some quiet time. I had been fairly busy. It was a weekend now that I remember, and I had been fairly busy. And I went to go lay down and rest. I had some quiet time, and I was like, I haven't just sat and just rested for a while. I always keep myself busy and distracted mentally, so I don't have to. So my hope is that I can get further down the recovery road, but not have to like sit and kind of acknowledge my pain and sit with my pain and experience my pain. So I keep myself as busy as I can, and doing that while trying not to overexert yourself when you have kind of limitations on cognition and your energy and stuff can be hard. So I was like, it would be good for me to take some quiet time and just experience some quiet and know where I'm at, where my baseline's at. So I go and I lay down, and I lay down relaxing for like a few minutes, and my thoughts start to race. And I don't know why, but I start to get really scared. And then being scared turns into fear. Fear turns into panic. Panic turns then, what I had never really experienced but one other time in my life, turned into something greater than panic. It took me a long time to figure this out. in the weeks and the months that followed, I spent time talking to people in the community who had experienced this thing they'd call the horror or the darkness. They have these terms for what people in psychiatric drug withdrawal would experience when maybe you withdraw too quickly, or you hit a rough patch, or you're polydrugged and your nervous system cannot handle what's taking place. And there's a really good poem about it that I'll try to link under this podcast that kind of helps describe it. But trigger warning, all this stuff, because it's really dark stuff. It's really unpleasant. In my mind, the best way to express it is that you're genuinely and utterly experiencing something that you feel no human being should ever have to experience. I mean, no human being. Your worst enemy, the worst of the worst anything. When you're in such exquisite, excruciating mental anguish that words just cannot furnish the situation. When panic seems to move beyond panic into this state where you can't stand to be alive, where just existence is utterly, vividly, clearly horrible and painful to an extent that are far beyond words. That, from my understanding, is akathisia. And I had experienced a tremendous amount of mental pain before. I had suicidality for 3 years straight, every single day. And this was something far greater than that. Of course, I don't want to say of course, but as you might think, suicidality comes along in this package of experiencing akathisia. If someone is not suicidal at this time, it's probably not akathisia, because it's not as if I wanted to act on the suicidality, I guess, or any more than normal. But I mean, if you can measure suicidality, it just is the highest, is that absolute peak of trying to resist, those impulses and just keep yourself during this period when this happened to me, I could not get out of bed because I was actually afraid that something bad would happen to me, or I would be committed, or something like this, because the mental pain I was going through was so lucid that I couldn't. It was something else. It was something I had never experienced before, and it was absolutely and utterly just terrible. And so I'm trying to describe it so that if you've never experienced it, you understand. If you've experienced it and you didn't know what it was, that maybe you know now, because at the time I didn't know what it was. When I had seen and tried to understand akathisia before, I saw it strictly as this restlessness, as this involuntary movement in the body. And while I believe that's a part of it, what it is, it's an internal restlessness that won't stop. And that's what I experienced. The panic and the feelings inside my brain were so accelerated and so out of control, and the scale of it was so high that it was something different entirely, something that no modern convention, I think, could understand. When you see someone go through akathisia, you look at them and you're experiencing it, and you're just I don't understand how the human body has the capacity to experience or to do what's happening, what's going on. And that's precisely, in my experience, what it is. It's when I went through it, I was something is so incredibly wrong with my nervous system that I'm experiencing something that human beings weren't meant to experience. And that's where I kind of started my exploration of what was happening to me. So that went on for a while. I think it was 30 minutes. And then I was immobile, so I had a discussion with a loved one about what was happening to me, and they're looking at me and they're like, "You look fine." I was just sitting still, looking straight forward. I didn't have the involuntary movements, although there was a part of me in my brain that wanted to move, and I felt like if I gave in to that I would never stop. So there's this kind of this parallel to what I've seen and heard about in others, to this restlessness that it seemed to be there in part, and I understand it, and I understand how they may be related, and I explained it to my loved one, and they talked with me for a while. We started talking about positive stuff, anything we could to get me through the moment, and it resolved to some degree. I think within an hour, but the time after that was not as if it's like it got 10% better, and then when that 10% was better, I was so glad that I was just in horrible, incredibly bad pain instead of excruciating pain, that I was able to function in some way. So I think, I hung out, I did a few things that night, and then I went to bed, and that night I was just kind of hoping, praying that this would never ever come back again, and it was some sort of fluke. That didn't turn out to be true. I woke up, I felt better the next day, not entirely better, I'm saying like just slightly better. Again, maybe like another 10% better. So feeling like 20% better after having like the worst nightmare of your life is not something to be proud of. Everything is still painful. Every movement, every thought, everything you do is still painful. But you can feel that maybe it's relenting, and that is a really helpful thought process. And we talked about physiology and psychology being married and being one thing. Those thoughts helped calm me down to some degree. And so it was at that time that I started thinking about what the hell is going on to me. What just happened? What did I do wrong? And I told some people that I know had dealt with akathisia, or that at that time I hadn't tied akathisia and that together yet. I just knew something had happened to me that was really, really, really bad, and I needed to get a handle on it. Otherwise, at that time I was absolutely sure that I would die, one way or the other, because I was completely immobile. I'm like, if this increases in frequency or whatever, I will not be able to get out of bed. I will not be able to function at all. And these are the things we think about when we're in this situation, So I started talking to people that had been through worse than me to try to understand what this was. And no one ever tells you that this is what you're experiencing. They just tell you what they've experienced. And I didn't link it to akathisia. What I think I linked it to first was toxicity. I think I ended up coming back to the candida stuff and thinking it was just this die-off scenario with the candida stuff in your stomach. As it dies, it releases toxicity. It's known to be really mentally unpleasant. You suffer from depression and anxiety and different physiological factors. And so I kind of tied it to that, and I was like, okay, this is really bad, toxicity. I was also in my group a lot of the time. I was talking to and handling situations that were really, really bad. People injured really, really badly by TMS, psychiatric drugs. And on a daily basis, I'm going in trying to do what I can to help them out, talk with them as much as possible, and get them any kind of help that they could have available to them that'll work them in a positive direction. This work is really, really hard to do. It's also really, really rewarding. But what I didn't know at the time is that when I'm injured by TMS and I go out and help people repetitively that are also injured by TMS, it can have a really big impact on me, because it's kind of like sticking your fingers in an open wound. Like, I have a tremendous amount of anger and frustration with my TMS injury, and so having that agitated on a daily basis, dealing with the frustrations other people have and the lack of justice and family problems, all the horrible stuff that comes along with TMS injury, seeing that happen to others is traumatic, and it's difficult. It can have an impact on you. It can have a really big impact on you. At the time, I had been doing this kind of stuff for like 3.5, 4 years. So it's been a really normal part of my life that I find really rewarding and I'm really happy to do. So I didn't understand how that kind of chronic stress can impact you negatively as well. So I'll kind of fast forward now that you got an idea of what had happened to me at that point. So about a week later, I had a relapse. I experienced what I'm calling the akathisia again, what I believe to be akathisia. Really severe event. It lasted a couple days, and then, it's basically non-functional for a couple of days, and I started to work my way out of it. It takes about 2 weeks to recover from it. About a week later, you could consider yourself like somewhat functional, and then like 2 weeks later, if I could make it that long, I'd actually kind of feel back to baseline. And then I recovered, I think, a week, 2 weeks, and then it happened again. I had this event where I just completely was crushed and shut down, and I was seeing this cycle. I knew part of it was related to toxicity from the candida, but at the same time, it didn't fit the framework perfectly. If that was the case, I should have been having it, like on a daily basis or every other day or something. It didn't quite fit the framework of the die-off that I was experiencing. So I started looking at other factors. I knew that social media was playing a role. Being online for long periods, being in front of a computer screen for long periods, dealing with emotional trauma for long periods is not good for your stress, not good for a lot of things. And I realized that there was really upsetting events that were happening online, or difficult events that were happening online, that were triggering me or triggering this thing. It has something to do with these events. Like, the more time I spent online in between these events, the more likely I would end up in this state of just really being in a really, really bad place. So I had these loose associations, and then so I became really, really desperate to improve beyond my circumstance. Now, being on Candida Cure, it takes a while, like 3 months, to kind of work through this initial kind of detox period and work your way into a place where you start feeling better. Because during the detox, it's just you're just miserable all the time. And I mean, I'm used to that misery. I'm used to being emotionally and cognitively exhausted all day, every day. I'm used to being in chronic physical pain all day, every day. And this is what was happening. So the akathisia was on top of all those things, which I was not used to. I was not set up or equipped to handle. Yeah, it put me to the next level. Like, I needed something else, or I needed to figure out what was going on. I kind of had figured out what some factors were. I didn't want to stop my activity online helping others. I really didn't. I mean, in that way, it was kind of addictive. Like, even though I knew it was taking a toll on me and it could potentially end my life, the community is just way too important to me. The friendships and all the stuff that goes on there, it becomes like a linchpin kind of piece of your identity at some point, because supporting and being a part of that community represents what you're doing to heal and what you're doing to try to seek justice for what happened to you. And what happened to all of us is a completely unacceptable consequence for what's going on in psychiatry and the medical community. Millions of people's lives are just absolutely devastated and destroyed, and all they're given is a middle finger and a letter in the mail telling him to go kick rocks. It's inhuman, and it's completely unacceptable on every standard of existence. If any single person was able to experience what we experience and then make a decision on how government should work, how society should work, how our justice system should work around this stuff, they would unequivocally change and unilaterally change everything about the way we handle these issues, because it's absolutely horrifying and inhumane, and any horrible bad adjective you could come up with, that's what it is. It's unacceptable on every human level. And so being a part of that community and standing behind that community, supporting that community, contributing to that community is some of the most important and meaningful stuff that we can do with our life after we're injured. And so I was connected to it. I'm still connected to it. But when your health is taking a hit because of it, it's really hard to pull away. And just like it's a completely different type of thing, but almost like an addict for me, like with food, right? Pulling away from it was like impossible. Pulling away from the community was impossible for me. It took me months and months and months to finally step away, even though my life was hanging in the balance, and I literally felt like death like every couple weeks, and was bedridden because of it, at least in part. I also had this toxicity thing. So I started looking more and more at what I could do, and I don't know how I came across this. I know I was talking to a few people about different supplementations and different things that might be helpful, but that's a constant conversation in the community. Everyone wants to try and do holistic, natural things to help themselves, and supplements are at the top of that list. It's an extremely hard thing to navigate. Everyone reacts differently to every single supplement. Some have horrifying reactions to things that have saved other people's lives, and vice versa. So there was, I don't know how I came across it. I just do not remember. There was this, I don't know, I think maybe I was listening to Joe Rogan. I don't remember, a podcast or something. And there was this Dr. Mark Gordon on, who is a neuroendocrinologist. And he made up his own specific supplementation for traumatic brain injury. And it sounded like the guy really, really knew his stuff. I'm sure he really, really does know his stuff. And he was a part of this movie called Quiet Explosions that he had. I think he helped produce it. He was definitely in the movie a lot. There is a change to your hormones and your kind of expressed hormone activity in your body when you go through a traumatic brain injury and or take psychiatric medications, get ECT or TMS. Your brain, controls the hormones that are released in your body. Everything in your brain has the potential to get impaired or changed when you're going through an injury, or just taking psychiatric medications, or just getting TMS. Even if you're not considering yourself as having been injured from it, your hormone levels can change, your regulation changes. That is something I experienced as a part of like this extreme fatigue and different symptomology that I had. And I was putting the pieces together at that time as I'm listening to this guy. He's talking about the different things you experience with TBI, and it's emotional things, energy-based things, that kind of stuff. And as he's talking about it, I'm putting the pieces of the puzzle together for this chronic fatigue that I've had, and these different sensations that are not psychological, physiological, things that happen to me over and over and over again when mentally, I'm not experiencing anything. I'm not anxious. I'm not depressed. I just wake up in the morning, getting going, and then all of a sudden I experience this extreme fatigue and I'm exhausted all day. Like, where the hell does that come from? For me, it's a really well-documented experience, but what's causing that, right? You're always looking for the root cause, or looking at what organ or system was affected to cause that, and you really don't get any answers. But I found Dr. Mark Gordon's stuff really illuminating, and to me it makes perfect sense. I think that is the root cause. I checked with some other people, I did some more research, and our hormone, organs or centers being disaffected by these treatments is absolutely occurring. We're all experiencing some form of traumatic brain injury, and so it lines up exactly with what he's saying. The dysregulation that happens is what's causing, in my mind, is what's causing, fatigue, anxiety attacks, panic attacks, all this stuff, when it's not accompanied with the psychological stimuli. And that was the big question mark for me. I'm like, I think my subconscious, is driving me crazy and triggering all this stuff. That was the conclusion that I had kind of come to. And because I'm cognitively impaired and I have a really hard time, even understanding how my brain's working and where my thoughts are going and stuff like this, and my memory is jacked, I'll be irritable for no reason. I kind of just gave up, and I was just like, my brain works differently now than before my injury. So I just have to, there must be psychological stuff going on that I don't understand, or that I'm not getting or remembering, and that's causing this stuff. But it's not, in my opinion. It absolutely feels like, and in every sense that I can see, is hormone dysregulation. And that's exactly what it feels like when I experience it. I have lots of other brain dysfunction. I have tinnitus. Like, I started salivating a ton. I have fasciculations all over my body, these muscle twitches. There's all kinds of dysregulation of my nervous system by way of my brain and my spinal cord. And to think that my hormones would be unaffected is kind of a ludicrous, silly idea. So anyways, I'm listening to this podcast, and he's got this supplementation and that he's talking about that is really interesting. And then there's this movie called Quiet Explosions. And, I think about it for a little while. I always do, because supplementation gets expensive. And everyone always wants you to try something else and do something else. Like, everyone in the community's probably spent thousands of dollars on supplementation over a period of time, because there's always something else to try. So I was really hesitant. I just don't like dabbling with supplements, because I've had so much disappointment. So I was like, I don't know if I want to try these supplements, but I can watch the movie. And I watched the movie, and I encourage anybody that's listening to watch it. And it was mind-blowing. It's absolutely awesome. It talked about, the kind of the hormone dysregulation, and it talked about what people go through when they have traumatic brain injury, which is great enough, because it just mirrors exactly what we're going through with this psychiatric injury and this medical device injury to our brains and nervous systems. But then it goes in more detail and talks about how traumatic brain injury doesn't have to come from an external stimuli, right? You don't have to be hit on the head to experience traumatic brain injury. It can be psychological, so you can go through, extreme psychological trauma. If you're a rape victim, if you're the victim of extreme abuse, different things like that, you can develop physiological TBI from those kind of events. Our vets that are being exposed to blasts, invisible forces, absolutely you can get a TBI from that. It's ridiculous to think you can't. Same thing with TMS, obviously, for me. It wasn't in the video, of course. In the video, they actually showcased TMS for this guy, and yeah, you can imagine. I don't need to explain how that made me feel at the time, but I will tell you that there's no perfect anything. Everywhere I've looked, every person I've talked to, there's always some flaw, right? There's always some hole in the logic. There's always something that you're going to have to figure out for yourself, and try to piece things together and move forward. It's extraordinarily rare that we find a piece of information that's just helpful and doesn't have some unpleasant bits in it that you have to disregard. And so is the same with this movie. But the other material in there was so incredibly helpful and illuminating. It's awesome. And so there's this group in there called Warrior Angel Foundation that's helping vets with TBI try to heal. But one thing this movie emphasizes that it's kind of subtle, but the use of psychiatric drugs to solve these problems is absolutely unacceptable, and it's harmful, right? So where Angel Foundation uses like looks at vestibular rehabilitation and supplementation to help people recover from TBI, and they've had really, really good results with it that they talk about in the video. So coming away from watching this video, I had two things. One, I started to put together the pieces of the puzzle, whereas my time I was spending in social media and the trauma I was getting from that, like basically reliving my own injury through others over and over and over again, and seeing other people mistreated on top of their TMS injury or other injury over and over and over again, people's lives being destroyed by their family members because they have an invisible injury and they think they're faking it, that kind of thing, my friends dying, all that stuff, like it just built up to where I honestly believe that I got another TBI on top of the TBI that I got from TMS, or it was just an extreme agitation of the TBI that I had on top of the toxicity that I was going through from the Candida cure and whatever else I was going through. I realized that this is what was causing the akathisia. My body and my mind were put into an extreme state from all these factors, and I needed to take a break from social media and take a break from electronics, like everything. Take a break from everything. I needed to get through this 90 days on Candida so that I could have some improvement, because once you're invested in that, everyone's different. I'm not saying if you're experiencing akathisia when you're doing a cleanse that you shouldn't stop. I'm saying that that wasn't an option for me. I got far enough along in it that I knew even if things got worse that I was going to go through the 90 days, and after the 90 days I actually stick with it a lot longer than that, because I just need to stay really, really clean in my eating probably for the rest of my life, but definitely longer than that, because I can't revert, I can't go backwards. Once I made it through this, that was it. Like I can't go backwards. I'm not going through this again. I'm not going through the toxicity. I'm not going through akathisia. I'm not going through any of this stuff, because I was barely surviving is like a really moderate term for what I was experiencing. I literally had conversations with my family members planning what was going to happen when I was going to die, because when I went through a bout of this, like, it might sound benign hearing it on a podcast, but when you go through a bout of it, you're absolutely certain it's going to kill you. It's not a question of like if you'll survive. When you're experiencing it, you're absolutely certain of your own death. That's how intense it is. I mean, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I really wouldn't. It's something else. So back to the good stuff. So I figured for myself, everybody has something to figure out at different points in time. For me, I really think I had figured it out. That being said, like, depriving yourself of all kinds of stuff, like, again, I had nothing to look forward to at the time. I didn't have a bunch of money I could go spend to make myself feel better. Couldn't just get out and do something. You know, those things were really hard for me to do. They caused me a lot more pain than they helped. I was really boxed in to an impossible situation. And those psychological factors really amped the room akathisia had to act in my life. I realized the only way I got out of the akathisia was just by laying down and being still and thinking about positive stuff and having positive conversations with loved ones. That was it. That's all I could do. But that did work to some extent. It worked me out. When I did that and I gave it time, it worked. I was able to come out. So I know that positive psychological factors helped the situation. I know that negative psychological factors encouraged the situation. I know toxicity was involved. I know my brain and my nervous system was under some sort of just fierce attack. You know, existential stuff, from stuff that was acting outside of it. It was just the feelings were too lucid, they were too vivid, they were too strong, and there was a change from what happened before in January to then. So I think about that often, and I thought about it a lot at the time. What changed? The diet changed. There was some level of toxicity there, and when you read about what people go through and die off, it's really gnarly stuff. I've never heard of akathisia before, but I think my situation's a special circumstance. But you've heard of things that sound similar to it, and when you hear things that sound similar to it, you really don't know if that was it or not, because with akathisia, it's very specific. Most people don't know about it, and even less people have experienced it. So trying to diagnose yourself or just figure out what's going on with you to try to be certain is very, very difficult. So lots of people around you, it's possible people around you have experienced it, or that you've experienced it and you don't even know. I had actually experienced akathisia one time before when a doctor put me on Lexapro. I had an extreme reaction to it, and I couldn't stop moving, and I couldn't calm down, and it was physiological, and it was an excruciating mental pain. Luckily, I just stopped the Lexapro and it went away. But that's another thing that helped me determine that it was akathisia, because I figured out that experience as well through this process or earlier, and then I was able to link the two together and remember some of the sensations that I had and the experience that I had, and they matched up. So time went on, time passed, the akathisia started to resolve, and it started to resolve like it was once a month instead of 2, 3, 4 times a month after I got through my 90 days. So just having it once a month is enough. And my life is still basically on hold. I still wasn't sure that I was going to survive. I know this sounds dramatic. I feel like an idiot saying that, but just being honest, like looking back, it is so frightening. This stuff is so nasty that, I mean, I'd rather be shot. I'd rather have someone saw an arm off. I'm not joking. Like, I am not joking in any sense. It gets super morbid, but it just gives you an idea of what's going on. Like, so at that time, I had identified some things, and then I'm trying to think of when. It was around that time in spring, summer. I tried Dr. Mark Gordon's protocol with his supplements after the seriousness of my situation kind of took hold, and I wanted to do something. I wanted to be proactive. I knew that it's possible it could maybe agitate me, make me worse, but I thought the potential of it helping, given what I had read, listened to, and then researched, that I should try it. So I tried his supplements. They seemed to help a little bit at the beginning, but it didn't end up really helping. Maybe some placebo. I felt excited at the beginning to maybe feel better, felt a little bit better, and then I just didn't move past that. It kind of felt the same, maybe slightly better. So after 90 days of the supplement, you're supposed to have, some level of recovery, and I just didn't have any. There is a lot of reports of it working for other people with TBI, so that my experience shouldn't be a limiting factor for anyone. It's something to look at, something to think about. There's some elements of caffeine in there, which I'm hypersensitive to caffeine, but I didn't. Well, actually, and then he's got a supplement that doesn't have the caffeine in it. I took the one without the caffeine, but some of the supplements in there people have been reactive to, so be careful and look at that if you think about trying. I did not react to his supplements without caffeine, which is kind of miraculous on its own for me. I react to everything. Almost everything gives me a racing feeling, unpleasant feeling to some level, or it makes me really sluggish, messes with me cognitively. That usually happens, except for with most benign supplements, but that did not happen to me with his stuff. That's his less reactive stuff without the caffeine. I got into vestibular rehabilitation. I found a place close to me, and as a side note, in case I forget to come back to it, that helped me maybe about 20% with the dizziness, the nausea, and a few of those kind of factors that I experienced. It was well worth the time I spent there. I think I spent 2 or 3 months. I was in there a few times a week doing exercises, moving my head around, pushing my limits on what made me dizzy and what didn't. And through principles of neuroplasticity, it's almost like a sensitivity exposure training. You expose yourself and you push yourself to different levels of agitating kind of your dizziness and stuff, and then it actually starts to resolve and go away, and your threshold becomes higher and higher. So you can improve your balance. You can improve the kind of the dizziness and the nausea that you experience on a daily basis from TBI through that, or at least I did. It was well worth my time. I've been through so much stuff and none of it has helped, but that is one thing that did help. That's the real deal. That was legit. So after Mark Gordon's stuff, it looked like it wasn't helping. I reached out to Warrior Angel Foundation just to talk to them and to try to get advice. And I had a friend that was a vet, and I wanted to get him in touch with them as well. See what they could do for him, because he's a hard one to get him to sign on to stuff. He's really got to know that it's going to work. He's busy. A lot of factors kind of work against him. So I reached out to Warrior Angel Foundation. They're freaking fantastic. They got back to me right away. I was really honest with them. It's like, hey, it's kind of a no BS situation. Like, this is what I'm dealing with. If you don't like it, don't help me. That's fine. Just if you're legit, like, communicate with me, help me out, and we can learn from each other, and then we can go forward. So that's what I did. They responded immediately, super stoked on everything that I had to say, and they communicated with me really, really well. And then they actually told me there's another supplementation they use. There's two different ones. There's Mark Gordon's, and then there's one by another doc. I can't recall his name right now, but it's an omega-3 based supplementation. A ton of omega-3s. And I had taken a decent amount of omega-3s before, and I didn't feel anything. I even maybe felt sluggish from it. But this one was specific, it was intensive, and it was by some really quality brands. I think a lot of it's like Nordic Naturals, and I think, as far as I know, it's a good brand. Their ingredients are clean and whatnot. And so I had asked them, hey, which one works better? And they said, hey, if you don't respond to Dr. Gordon's, that happens. There's this other protocol that works really, really well for people too. It's not something you just, you'd want to dismiss. You'd want to give it a try if you can. So I tried this omega-3 based supplementation, and I'm still on it now. That was like months ago. I think I'm almost on 3 months. And it was not long before I started feeling some more emotional balance than what I had before. And that's a really big deal for me, because emotionally I experience a ton of stuff in a day. Anywhere from really anxious to super fatigued and depressed. Like, it's kind of my main complaint. Like, I can deal with the tinnitus, the pain, all this stuff. Like, I can deal with, as long as emotionally, like, I feel kind of positive. Like, I've accepted this stuff in my life, and I can deal with it. But obviously the emotional stuff is the hardest. Like, that's the stuff that really impacts your quality of life. So I tried the omega-3 stuff. It's super heavy on omega-3s right off the bat. I was like, this is great. There's so many omega-3s in here. I'm going to react to it. It's going to go badly to some extent. So I'm just trying to think of how I can mitigate it and figure it out, But I had this open dialogue with Warrior Angel Foundation. So I felt pretty confident that if I react to it, I could talk to them and figure something out to where I could get it to work, or at least give it its best chance before I called it quits or whatever. But I felt a little sluggish at first taking it. Still, there's so much omega-3s. I mean, I'm taking like multiple pills, like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, like at every meal. Like, it's a lot. Like, it's way more than you would think for any supplementation. And I asked them, I was like, are you sure this is right? They're like, yeah, just give it a shot. A lot of us are really sensitive, and it still works. Go for it. And I'm just thinking, these guys are full of crap. Like, they're not as sensitive as me. It's not going to work. I did not react poorly to that stuff. I did not once. And I think it's a testament to how much your brain needs these fatty acids, these omega-3s. Like, they're supposed to be theoretically just like food for your brain. in that way, like they can never really react badly to them. I don't know how true that is, right? These are some of the things I've heard, but I took that stuff and I never had a problem with it. I did not react negatively to it. I mean, I was a little sluggish. I could feel that my system was maybe a little overwhelmed from it, but I never had a really adverse effect. I mean, it was really slight. It was like I just felt maybe a little bit more fatigued than normal, but my range for fatigued is huge. Like, I can be so fatigued, like I just don't do much of anything in a day. Literally, like just lay, stand, and sit, and I don't have the energy to figure anything out or do anything. Or I can be opposite. I can be anxious and racing around. So having that as a range, like feeling a little bit more fatigued than normal, is not too big of a deal for me. I don't think it would be for anyone else based on what I experienced either. But here's the thing. After, I think it was maybe a week or two, I noticed my emotions were generally more positive. And I don't swing that way if it's not the real deal. Like, my emotions are hard to control and to deal with. Like, again, I have a lot of range there too, and nothing kind of slows that stuff down without like a lot of work and effort. Like, Candida cure, like eating really clean, has done it, but it's a very, very slow process. It's almost unrecognizable. Like, I'll do it for after 3 or 4 months of an extreme cleanse, I might feel a little bit better, like generally speaking. But after 2 weeks of this stuff, I felt emotionally, I was measurably like more balanced emotionally. Like, when I felt positive, it didn't swing really hard the other way. My negatives were less negative. I mean, was it life-changing? No, it wasn't life-changing, but I don't care. I don't want life-changing, or I'm not looking for that anymore. I'm just looking for something that is real, positive, genuine, healthy improvement in my life and my physical health and my mental health. Like, that's it. I'm looking for inches, not like yards or miles or even feet, because I know that's probably the real deal. Whereas like us looking for a quick fix or answer or serious cure for the harm that we have is not, it's not real. It's not going to happen. It doesn't address the root cause, right? And that's what I found. If I find something else, great, but that's been my experience. So after 2 weeks, I was feeling a little bit better. There's intense, they really overdo the omega-3s for the first month, and then the months after that, they cut it back a little bit. So I felt after the first month, like I felt markedly better. I mean, it wasn't a ton better, but it was better. I could actually tell the difference. I've never felt the difference with a supplement before, not for that period of time. Sometimes I'll have an initial effect for a small period, but it was a lasting effect. At that point, it had been 2 weeks of feeling better, and it was a slow, controlled, positive thing. It was not, I feel better today, but not tomorrow or whatever. Like, every day kind of gradually felt a little bit better. I don't know about my cognition. I think my cognition might be a little bit clearer. The buddy of mine said his cognition was better, his memory was better. And so I think that's a big possibility for some of us. For me, I think it's maybe a little bit better, but it's a hard one for me to measure. My cognition's been crappy for a long time. It didn't get worse, I can tell you that. A lot of the supplements I've taken, it's made it worse. So that's that. I finished up the first month, and then when I hit the second month, that sluggishness went away. So that little bit of kind of feeling a little bit more fatigued went away, but the positive emotional effects stayed. And overall, I haven't had any akathisia since then. The akathisia was starting to resolve by the time I took Mark Gordon supplements, and then so it kind of naturally resolved in time for taking these supplements, so I can't say that it had a direct impact on that. Also, I got off the 90 days, or I finished my 90 days with the Candida cure, so a lot of the toxicity should have been done from my body at that time. So the toxicity also resolved. I also have been off social media for that time as well. So a lot of these factors that I believe were causing akathisia, the root cause was removed, and so I felt better. So, like most things in life, we can't be exactly sure what happened, but we can kind of take measure of the whole situation and think about what was likely and what we learned, and then go from there. But geez, that kind of tells you where I was at and what I've been through and where I'm at now. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of resources to look at. The other thing that was running concurrently to this stuff at the whole time was these neuroplastic principles that I've been working on. I got this book, Rock Steady, by Remenyi. It goes over how we think about the sensations we feel in our body and how to kind of reframe them. And in my mind, you take the teeth out of them. And when you reframe them and you look at them for what they really are, whether it's pain or tinnitus or unpleasant, thoughts or mental sensations, physical sensations, like if we re-examine how we're experiencing these things and what our body's trying to tell us, then based on principles of neuroplasticity, we start to rewire our brain when we do that every single time, right? Every single time your pain or your tinnitus comes up, if you stay calm, you get calm, you think about what that means, what's the sensation you're feeling, you accept it, it's there, it's okay, it's not going to kill you, it's your body sending you a message. Like, the sensation is not going to kill you. Even if you're having a heart attack, the sensations of the heart attack aren't what are going to kill you, right? But your body is sending you messages and saying, this is what's going on. So if we can take those and process them and put them in their appropriate place and realize what they are for what they are, then we start to rewire our brain and we start alleviating the panic, the cortisol rushes that we're getting, all the destructive stuff that's happening to our physiology from our reactions to that stuff starts to get rewired. And it can actually be a positive thing. If we start having positive reactions to the stuff that's going on in our bodies, these sensations that we used to label as unpleasant, it's really a game changer as well. And I've been working on that. I don't know if I mentioned that in my last podcast or not, from a long time ago. But that's another big piece of what I've been doing this whole time. I'm experiencing this unpleasant stuff, including the akathisia and stuff. I'm trying to... It feels really futile when you're dealing with something as sinister as akathisia, but I'm reprogramming myself every time, and I'm, walking myself mentally through my life, my existence, and where I'm at, and reframing that for something positive, reframing that for something acceptable, reframing that for me being grateful, even for my experience, my TMS injury. That was a big one for me. It was really hard, but the fundamental way I look at life has changed since my TMS injury. I'm not out there just doing whatever I want for whatever reason I want, just gratifying myself all the time. I'm seeing the people around me. I'm seeing what they're experiencing. I'm learning from them. I'm learning from my own experiences. I'm doing the right thing. I'm trying to do the right thing 100% of the time. I'm trying to be honest 100% of the time. I'm trying to think about others 100% of the time. Am I making it? No, I'm not making it. But I'm coming close. It's taken a while for me to get that far along, right? At first, you're batting like 0, especially when you're injured. It can be very, very hard. But when we start questioning our thoughts, questioning how we were raised, questioning what we've been taught, questioning who taught us and why, questioning why we experience the things we experience, and trying to reframe these things in the light of truth and honesty, compassion, and through a lens of fortitude. Like, can I get through this? Yes, I can get through this. Other people have gotten through this. I can get through this. I don't have to be miserable. I can be happy even if I'm in pain. These kind of thoughts over and over and over again, really evaluating them, thinking through them, and if you choose to believe them, really believing them. That fundamentally changes the way we think, obviously, but then the way we think and how often we think that way, that's neuroplasticity. That's how our body operates. Our body operates based on what our brain is telling us to do and the thoughts that we have and the actions we're trying to complete through our mental processes. So our physiology, our physical state, is tied directly to our thought processes and what we think, the way we think it, and how we execute those thoughts and how we execute on those thoughts. So I'm really abandoning this dimensional idea of, oh, this is my physiology, this is my physical health, and then this is my mental health, and these are my mental processes, and these are happening over here, and my physical health is happening over here, and I don't want them to bleed into each other, or, I want them to, work together better, that kind of stuff. I am trying to see things for how they really are, not what a doctor tells me, not what a research paper tells me, not what books are telling me. I'm trying to see them clearly for what's really going on, and clearly for what my human experience is. Like, I can experience this life the way that I am and the way that I can progress to. Is it really important that I'm reading a medical journal about an injury similar to mine and they're telling me my chances of survival are this or that, or I may experience this or that or whatever? How important is that to me and how I live my life and how I experience life? Is this directly important? Is it relevant? Or is it just some jibber jabber that a clinician wrote down because he observed it, right? And now he's thinking about it with these different physiological and mental dimensions and describing it and trying to tell others that his ideas are important. I mean, these are real questions. I'm not sitting here telling you that medical research is not unimportant, right? It all has its place and its time, but how relevant is it to what you're going through right now? Is your biggest improvement to your health or your well-being or your consciousness going to be what you glean from what a doctor tells you or what you read in a research paper? Or are you making an effort to think about why you are the way you are and what you've learned from your history and your past, why you're here, why you're experiencing the things that you are, and what that means for you? Are you asking yourself those questions? Some people think they're not important. I think they're absolutely critical. And ever since my TMS injury, that's been the meaning of my life, is figuring that stuff out, reframing things and getting back to a place where I'm happy with the decisions that I make and why I'm here, and not just working every day to further the agenda of a huge company that doesn't care about people and actively harms people in a lot of different ways to increase profits. I'm not working for that agenda anymore. My talents aren't going towards that agenda, right? They're going towards the agenda that I choose, and they're going for the betterment of my friends, my family, my community, and myself in the way that I see that's absolute best at the time. There's a really big difference in our psychology, or the psychology of those two paradigms that the world is working in lots of times. And how do you think that impacts your physicality or your physical health? Most people out there are going to tell you that there's no impact, there's no difference, right? Like, your job, what you do at your job, doesn't have an impact on your physical health. You need to exercise and eat healthy and do all this stuff to maintain your physical health, and you doing amoral or unethical stuff at your job or working a job that you don't like is not going to have a big impact on your health as long as you do this or that, right? Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not true. My whole life I went on thinking that I could just do whatever I wanted in my professional life and otherwise, and go home at the end of the day and be perfectly fine because I ran every day and I ate well and I did these things at that time. And emotionally I was healthy. I had good positive relationships, but I was still doing stuff that was unethical, that was against my moral code at work, because I needed to survive, I needed to get along, I needed to get a paycheck, and then I ended up in a TMS chair. I mean, it's heavy stuff, and we all have it. We all have our own brand of it. Every single person that I talk to has a really impactful, really important story that has meaning and value on an extraordinary level for themselves. But guess what? It's also an extraordinary level of importance to others. I can't tell you how much it means to me when someone shares a personal story with me. It fundamentally changes my life. Every single story I hear from someone else where their just unhinged truth comes out, and because they're in a bad spot and they're just telling me all the details of their life and why they did what they did and how they ended up. And that stuff, the lessons and the information just fundamentally changes me every single time, because I know they're being honest. Like, you can see it, you can hear it, you can feel it. And the information they're giving you is so valuable, because everyone conceals this stuff. Everybody keeps the ugly unpleasantness, gross, weird, freaky stuff, violent, anger, traumatic stuff to themselves, because it's not fun to talk about, and we care about what other people think about us. But it's to our detriment. I don't think as human beings we're meant to be entirely private. I think we're supposed to share our stuff in community, and I think it's an even bigger responsibility of our community to hold these things sacred, to learn from them, to honor them, and to act on them if that's what needs to take place. So these are the things that have been on my mind as I've been going through what I've been going through, and they have been since my TMS injury. But the longer I'm around since my injury, the more I'm convinced that this stuff is just of paramount importance. And I relate that to my recovery. I am recovering. The akathisia stuff with the setback. I thought I was going to die. I didn't die. I thought I was going to die after TMS. I was sure I was going to die. I didn't. Tomorrow might be a different story. But I've been blessed with the time to reflect on this stuff and figure stuff out. And I couldn't be more thankful that I've had that. And the really trippy part is that the worst injury of my life is what afforded me the ability to do that. And I talk to people, and they're in really bad spots. They're in really unpleasant places. And I think the one thing I really hope at the end of the day is that they're taking themselves seriously, and they're taking their lives seriously. And it's not that we can't have fun, like if we're taking things seriously. I take every opportunity to have fun, but I still take my life very, very seriously now. Serious doesn't mean bad. Serious doesn't mean negative. Serious can mean awesome. Serious can mean great. It can mean fun. It can mean cool. It can mean genuine love and care for all the people around you at the same time. But I just hope people are taking things seriously. I mean, we're all born in a specific time period where certain stuff is going on. We're born in a time period where psychiatry is some insane, occurrence right now that's massively prevalent in everyone's lives and extremely dangerous. Okay, and with that, I will wrap it up. As usual, I'm sure there's a million things that I forgot, but I wanted to get back and touch base. There's a lot of people out there that I really miss a lot from being away from social media. Like, the community, again, it could not be more important to me, but me surviving this last 9 months has been more important, because if I didn't, I would never have an opportunity to get back to people. I wouldn't have an opportunity to to move on past this and heal, and hopefully do even more in the future. It's kind of what keeps me going every day, is the hope that, man, one day I would be okay, everything would be fine, and that I could just work my ass off to get things done for our community and get people on the page of understanding what's really going on out there, and just crush the deception that's going on out there. So not very many people listen to this, which is great. I like it that way. But for the people that do listen, thanks. I hope this is benefiting you, and I'm going to try to do it more often. And I try to do it in more depth and detail, but hopefully it's a real solid mechanism and effective way to help people through their injury and help people through recovery and what they're going through. Lastly, I just want to say, I talking this podcast out, and even when I was thinking about it, I don't want anybody to be offended about what I said. Everyone's experience is unique and powerful and important. I use terms and talk through experiences that kind of belong to me, but I use language that other people may use as well, or may just, I don't want to belittle anyone else's experience with my own. There's a lot of people out that suffer much, much, much worse than me, and I don't want to take away from anything that they have to say, their voice or their experience or anything. Everyone's experience is powerful and important and different. This is my experience and how I choose to explain it, and it's every bit of it is my honest belief and expression of what happened to me. So the last thing I would want is to make anybody feel bad or be offended. So my greatest hope is that that did not happen, but I really think that everybody would just benefit and appreciate what I have to say, and hopefully it proves really, really helpful to people. So with that, I'm going to take off. It's my hope I'll get to talk on the podcast again soon. Everybody take care, be the best that you can be out there. Thanks for listening to the Unshadowed Thought.